Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to another episode of the Iron Life Podcast. I am your host, Chris Tutela, here to help you live the Iron Life. And I want to talk to you today if you are a first responder, specifically firefighters. You guys have a lot to deal with. I used to be a firefighter myself, and I'll tell you that story if you don't know that about me, if you're a new listener to the show or you just forgot. I was a firefighter over here in good old Springfield, New Jersey, a small department here, and I was on board for about 3.5 years, closer to 4 years, somewhere around there. And I was a volunteer for about 1.5 years prior to that. So I went to the academy as a volunteer back in 2011. And about a year after or so, after I graduated the fire academy, the town that I was volunteering for, Springfield, which is a combination department, held a test. And I trained my ass off for that test. It was my goal at the time to become a firefighter because at the time what I wanted to do was run my training business and be a career firefighter because the schedule allows for that. And I just opened my gym in June of 2012, right before I got hired in August of 2012. So the timing couldn't have been better because that, from a business standpoint, I had no idea what I was doing. So the fire department was a blessing for me. It saved my life. It saved TTS because really it was at a loss for the first couple of years, and I was taking my money that I was earning from the fire department, putting it into the business. But anyway, those 3.5, 4 years were really they were great years for me. They challenged me in many ways, and I got to really see and understand what firefighters go through, the lifestyle that firefighters live. Because although I was training firefighters before I became one, you don't really understand that type of lifestyle unless you're in it. So it was a huge learning experience. I faced a lot of fears. I had to overcome a lot to get that job. So I have nothing but the utmost respect for all of you firefighters, all you police officers, first responders, everyone, because I get it. I get what you guys go through. And so I wanted to put this episode together for all of you because most firefighters do not train or prepare properly. A lot of the guys and girls that I work with these days, that whether they're coming to us over at TTS or if I'm working with them online, there's still a huge disconnect and misconception on what their training should look like. So I want to break it down for you so you have a little bit of a template to base your own training and programming off of. And now listen, if you're not a firefighter, if you're not a first responder, the stuff that we're going to go over today will still apply to you. So don't just think that you have to skip over this episode because you're not a firefighter, because you will still strongly benefit from everything that I'm going to go over with you today. Okay, so grab out your pens and notebooks and let's dive into this. So the first thing that you need to focus on, if you are a firefighter, in your training should be getting stronger, okay? Getting stronger. Because most firefighter training programs that I see out there involve circuit-style training or putting on your turnout gear and doing all this wacky cardio stuff, which maybe there's a time and a place for that stuff, and maybe it's fun to do at the firehouse or whatnot. But, we're missing the point of quality strength training and strengthening the body from head to toe. Not only will you be able to apply more force with less energy, less demand of energy, because you'll be stronger, which will ultimately improve your conditioning, but you'll be bulletproofing your body from head to toe, helping yourself prevent those common injuries that often happen on the fire ground or on medical calls. So we got to get strong first, because when we get strong first, that's also checking the box of stability. It's also checking the box of mobility. It will also enhance your speed and your conditioning, as a byproduct without even specifically working on speed and conditioning. Those things will improve because you're going to be able to apply more force to the ground when you're running, whatever it is, right? But all those things will improve by just getting stronger. So instead of just trying to make yourself tired in your workouts, focus on making yourself better. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to do horizontal pushing and horizontal pulling. We need to do single leg work and or lunging. We need to squat or do a squat variation. We need to hinge or do a hinge variation. You should be doing loaded carries. You should be doing sled pushes. You should be doing sled drags. You should also be focused on body weight training, and I'll get to that in a second, but think about the stuff that your job entails. You're crawling on the ground. You might have to crawl through a tight space and drag a person across the floor and then lift them to a window or out of a door, pull them out of a basement. You need to be able to control your own body weight. But the first step is getting stronger from head to toe in those movement patterns that I just discussed. Now, getting strong follows a scale of progression that we went over on the show before, okay? So the first step is finding the right exercise for you. You can't skip that step. Just because you're a firefighter doesn't mean you should be doing every single big lift or exercise. Depends on what your injury history looks like, what your mobility restrictions look like, if you're feeling any pain, if you're banged up, whatever. But we got to find the right exercise for you. Now, once we find the right exercise for you, then we have to focus on mastering the movement, mastering the technique for all the exercises that you are using in your program. You need to become a goddamn pro at each and every movement pattern. Doing these exercises correctly, you have to treat it like a sport or a martial art where you're learning the skill. All right, so we got the right exercise for you. Now we got the right exercise for you. And why am I drawing a blank? Ming, can we cut that? Okay, we're going to come back here. All right, I'm back. So we got the right exercise for you. We're mastering the technique. We're mastering the movement, okay? Now we have to focus on the effort that you are applying to each and every set. And again, you've heard me talk about this before, but that comes down to weight selection. Making sure that if you're going for a set of 5 or a set of 6, we're using a weight that's appropriate for 5 or 6, not a weight that's appropriate for 10 or 12, okay? So make sure you're using an appropriate weight. And then from there, we could progress by either progressing the exercise or progressively overloading, making sure you're increasing weight and or total volume each week. Building in deload weeks to make sure that you're recovering from your workouts and all that stuff, okay? So you're progressively overloading, and then we need to stay consistent, guys. You need to stay consistent with all of those things over and over and over again for the rest of your life. But that's how you get stronger. That's the simple way to put it, okay? Now, you cannot become explosive or powerful without creating a foundation of strength first, which is why getting strong first is important. But then we could focus on power, which is essentially strength times speed. So if we don't have that strength component, then power, we shouldn't be focused on power because there's not enough force to produce. Okay, so now that we have that foundation of strength, now we could start to work on power after a few months of training. And if you're already a pretty strong guy or gal, then we could start to incorporate this right away. But that's where I would suggest focusing, unless you are somebody who has done Olympic weightlifting before and you spent a lot of time on it, then I would focus on med ball throws and jumps and sprints to focus on power and to train for power. Okay, now you could do that in the start of your workout. You could also do it later on in the workout when you're fatigued. Okay, the best way to get the most out of your training for power is to do it when you're fresh, but there's going to be a time and a place where you're going to have to display force fast and quickly when you're tired by the demand of your job, right? So you got to make sure that you are training for power when you are fatigued as well. So you could do that later in the workout, maybe as a finisher or something like that. So with that said, I mentioned earlier that you should be training by moving your body weight through space as well. So we have our big meat and potatoes. That's our strength training, okay? Those are the big lifts that we're talking about. Now, of course, you could throw in some isolation work too. You want to get some meathead work in. You want to catch a pump, of course. But the big meat and potatoes of your strength training should be those big movement patterns. And you want to throw in some delt work. You want to throw in some biceps, some tricep stuff. Whatever it is that you want to do, of course, we could throw that stuff in. But just before I get into the body weight stuff, think about how important all of those movement patterns are for strengthening your chain from head to toe, and also how they carry over to your job. A reverse sled drag is really important for you. A forward sled push is really important for you. A loaded carry is very important for you. And of course, we could throw on some weighted vests and whatnot if you want to simulate some of the effects of having your turnout gear on, which would simulate more of a real world environment. But you don't want to do that for everything. I think people take that too far. But if you wanted to throw that weighted vest on when you're doing loaded carries or reverse drags or something like that, I wouldn't be against that. But you don't need to do it for every single exercise. All right? But now getting to the body weight stuff. If your job requires you to crawl, then you should probably be crawling in your training. And those are some exercises where we could now toss on a weighted vest for sure and add them into your program. It could be part of your warm-up. We could use it as conditioning, as a finisher. Bear crawls are a great option for this. You could even do bear crawls when you're loading it and you're dragging a plate with your feet. Those are gator walks, old school there, where you put your toes into the lip of a plate and you get into like a push-up position, and now you're walking with your hands and pulling a plate along with you. But guys, that's great for building strength and stability in your shoulders as well. But especially if it's part of your job, I mean, you want to be doing that shit in your training. You don't need to do it every day. It shouldn't be the staple. It's not like the big lift of the day. But these are things that you throw in so when shit hits the fan, you're ready, okay? And you're ready to do the work that is required of you, that your job calls for, all right? But other body weight stuff is going to help you. When you could control your own body weight through exercises, and you get really strong in exercises like dips and on chin-ups, these are inverted rows, the crawling. These are, and of course, these core exercises too. When you learn to control your body weight through space, and that becomes comfortable for you, when you're in a position where now your life may be on the line or somebody else's life is on the line, you're ready. It's not a foreign feeling for you to be crawling around or having to pull yourself up on a window or whatever the fuck. Pull yourself, if stairs collapse and you got to pull yourself up to get back to the first floor, you should be strong enough to do that if the situation allows for you to get your ass out of there, right? But also pulling somebody else out of a bad situation. That's why we want to strengthen the body where you're moving your own body through space, but you're also strong to move external load as well. All right? So get strong, learn how to move your body weight through space. And if you suck at body weight exercises right now, guys, it's important to know that might be due to having too much body fat on your frame. So the next point here is make sure that your nutrition is dialed in. So if you are a firefighter, listen, guys, it's no excuse to eat like shit. All right? You should be eating really well to keep your body fat in check, but also for all these other health benefits. I mean, if you're just sucking down sugar all day and flour and processed foods and these industrial seed oils, I mean, you're already unfortunately, more susceptible to cancer and to heart disease than anybody else, right? Because of the demands of your jobs, the demands of your job, the lack of sleep, the stress. So you gotta not only exercise, but you gotta make sure your fucking diet is in check, fellas and ladies. All right, because if your diet is in check, that means your health is gonna be subpar. So we got to get healthy first, and we could do that through obviously good exercise and good nutrition and recovery, which is going to be my next point. But we got to get good nutrients in you. We have to keep inflammation at a minimum. We have to focus on gut health. So we could really make your nutrition simple. I'm not saying you have to go on a really specific diet, unless that's your thing. You want to get shredded. We got to maybe have to dial in a little bit more. But just generally speaking, guys, we got to make sure we're focused on the foundational principles of good nutrition. Eating real food, eating less processed bullshit, not drinking sugar, having a lean source of protein at each meal, getting enough calories in, enough quality nutrients, getting fruits, getting vegetables in, getting some starch, some unprocessed carbohydrates, some sweet potato, shit like that. I mean, not only will your physique change and will you lose body fat by dialing in on these nutrition principles, but you'll also improve your health, your mental clarity, your focus, right? Your energy, if I didn't say that already, your libido, because we all know that your hormones are really affected due to the lack of sleep and the demands of your job and the stress hormone cortisol being so high in your blood. Eating like shit is going to make all of that worse. Okay, so now your sex drive and your testosterone levels might start to plummet. No bueno. All right, so when you eat well, it'll help these other things improve. And it's going to reduce your risk to some degree of heart disease, of course, diabetes. And if you're not sleeping well, your risk of diabetes is much greater too. So you can improve these things by changing your diet. So don't just look at the training and think it's like, oh, I'm a firefighter, so I got to do this wacky HIIT style training. No. Your training's really important for reasons that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. But your nutrition's got to be dialed into. And as a byproduct, fat will come off of your frame. And then as a result to that, you'll be able to do body weight exercises better. Your relative strength will improve. You'll be able to do more push-ups, more chin-ups, inverted rows, things like that. Okay, so you got to get these things in check for all of these factors, guys. But if you're having any hormonal issues, if you're having whatever, anything that I just talked about, your cholesterol's going up, your blood pressure's high, well, take a look at what you're eating. Because I know firehouse eating isn't always the cleanest food, but you can. I was actually the chef on my shift. I wouldn't call myself a chef. I cooked us dinner on my shift. But I always made, ground turkey breast with some brown rice. I would throw some salsa on there. We would make veggies. We would make some onions to throw on top of there. We would throw Greek yogurt on there on the ground turkey, like sour cream. We do ground beef. We do sweet potatoes. On Sundays, I would make my oatmeal pancakes with egg whites and Greek yogurt, and we put some nut butter on there. And the guys loved it, right? It wasn't like the guys on my shift were big fitness guys, but a lot of them actually lost weight because of what they were eating at the firehouse, because the firehouse days is when they were eating the worst. So just by those 2 days a week, essentially, alone, they were losing weight. They were improving their health just by eating a little bit better on the days at the firehouse. All right. Now, here's the other thing. I know a lot of the old timers that are on your shift, if you're a younger guy, they're probably not going to be the most supportive when it comes to you eating healthy. You can't let that bug you. All right. You can't let them get under your skin. You got to just, hey, maybe your actions will influence them, but don't get sucked into the arguments, because I've done that and it doesn't work out. They don't hear what you're saying. They don't care. You're the low man on the totem pole. They're not going to give a shit. So wherever you're at in your career, it's just important for you to not get sucked into the bullshit of those that may be a little bit more negative and kind of poo-pooing your fitness journey here. So just don't get sucked into that shit. And, another thing that I would really suggest, because you might get caught up on calls, you might be stuck up on a highway for a while or a fire. So I would always bring a shaker cup with a couple scoops of protein in it. I would bring some fruit, and I would bring a bag of cashews or almonds or something, and I would just keep that in the rig. This fucking fly is like right in my nose. I would always keep that in the rig. So I would have my breakfast before going into the firehouse. I would bring 2 shakes with me, and I would bring a lunch. So 1 shake I would have between breakfast and lunch. I would then have my lunch, and then I would have that extra shake in the rig, and I would either have that between lunch and dinner or keep that as a reserve if we got stuck on a call forever. At least you have that to slam down. And then, of course, you have your dinner. And dinner could always be one of the meals that I just suggested. You make some steaks, you make some baked potatoes. It's not anything that the guys are going to hate eating. So encourage them to eat a little bit better. Get some steaks, get some baked potatoes, get some sweet potatoes, get some turkey breasts, get some lean beef, and you're good to go. Get some lean beef, make some burger patties. Again, these are all foods that everybody will enjoy. So you just kind of have to go out of your way and see if you can whip some of that stuff up. And if you're not the cook on your shift, then bring your food with you. And it's no disrespect to the person that's cooking. Just let them know that you got some dietary stuff going on, and you don't even have to really explain it more than that. Just say, hey, I got some health issues that I'm working out, so I got to eat a little bit better. And keep it as simple as that if you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. All right, but your diet is really important, guys. Again, I want to stress this again. You guys are more susceptible to heart disease, to stroke, to diabetes, and to cancer due to the demands of your job already. Let's reduce your risk by getting your diet and your training in check, as well as my next point here, which is your recovery. Okay? Your recovery starts with your sleep. And twice a week, or however your shift cycle works, your sleep is going to be jacked up. All right, we know that. We know that even nights where you don't get a lot of calls, your quality of sleep probably isn't great, or it definitely isn't great. You can't really get into that deep sleep because you're always thinking about the bell going off. And the nights where your sleep is screwed, where you're out all night, that's going to affect your days that follow your shift, okay? Your circadian rhythm is off. So what can you do? Well, you could only do so much. All right, I'll be honest with you guys. The lack of sleep quality is going to affect your health. How far that goes, I don't know. But we could do our best to try to reduce the risks of any long-term diseases and whatnot by making the most out of your sleep environment. So, at the firehouse, I would certainly suggest getting a sleep mask. I know. The guys are going to bust your balls about it, but it's all good. All right? Get yourself a sleep mask so you could black out the room so it's pitch dark. You can't do much about the noise if the guys are going to keep the radios on and all that stuff, so you got to do what you got to do while you're there. But when you get off shift in the morning, try to keep some sunglasses on, keep a hat on, try to get a little bit of as little sun exposure as possible if you had a bad night of sleep, especially if you've been out running all night, and try to get to sleep as soon as you get home and catch up on the sleep that you missed. That might not always be practical, but that would be an ideal scenario if you can do that. If you can't do that, then the nights where you are at home, well, even if you can do that, the nights where you're at home, you have to make sure that your sleep environment is top-notch. Make sure that room is cold and dark. Make sure you cut off electronics an hour before bed. No light in your room at all. No notifications on. No screen sucking before bed. Do a brain dump so you're not up. Cut your water off at least a few hours prior to bed so you're not waking up to piss all night. Make sure that all this stuff is in check. So we're creating a better sleep environment. And then when you wake up, now we want to get that circadian rhythm back up to speed. So now when you have a good night of restful sleep and you're getting up at a reasonable hour and you had, your 8 or 9 hours of sleep, get outside first thing in the morning. Get your sunlight. Get that vitamin D exposure, or production, I should say. Get that sunlight exposure to increase your cortisol levels. We want to suppress melatonin levels at that point when you're waking up, right? So we want melatonin production to be at an all-time high when you are sleeping, and we want the cortisol levels to come up when you start actually getting up for the day. So get out, get into the sun, expose yourself, no sunglasses, no hat at this point, right? You only want to do that when you have a really shitty night's sleep and we're trying to get back to bed after your shift at the firehouse. But that will really help you improve your sleep. But guys, that is so important. That cannot be overlooked. We're talking about firefighter health, firefighter fitness. I mean, your sleep and your recovery is huge. Now, some other things you could throw in, sauna. Sauna has incredible health benefits due to the heat shock proteins that are produced when you're exposed to heat. There is I believe that study in Sweden that Dr. Rhonda Patrick talks about. There's a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality in men who sauna. I think it was 4 times per week for 20 minutes. You could look up that study for the exact numbers, but sauna has incredible cardiovascular benefits and a huge benefit for reducing all-cause mortality. So get your ass in the sauna. Make it a top priority for you, because if you're getting shitty sleep and you have all these other risks, let's reduce those risks, right? 40% reduction in all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality, guys. That's definitely something that we need to look at, okay? So we could talk about massage. We could talk about cryotherapy. We could talk about cold exposure in the shower, doing those contrast baths, cold and hot, or just, finishing your shower with a nice cold shower for 3 minutes. But next to your sleep, the sauna would be the top thing that I would say for all firefighters to do. So put that on your list, put that on your schedule, and get in there as often as you can for at least 20 minutes, okay? That would be a really great thing to do when you're coming off shift. And another thing, just from a health perspective, just try to stay away from fluorides and parabens and all the shit that's in our lotion. I mean, this could be an entire episode on this stuff, but you're already exposed to gases and all these chemicals and all this bad shit. Try to keep it out of your day-to-day life, but maybe we'll save that for another episode because we're running short on time here. But your recovery is really important, guys. And now finally here, I wanted to save this for last, but we'll just briefly go over conditioning. So you guys have different energy. We all have different energy systems, right? You have your anaerobic systems, right? You have your aerobic energy systems, and it's important to train all three, right? The 2 anaerobic systems and your aerobic system. So the best aerobic training that you can do is just get your step count up, right? Daily walks in. Try to get 10,000 steps in a day. Keep it really simple. Do that 7 days a week. At the firehouse, you're probably moving around anyway. All right, so 10,000 steps per day, super important. Okay, now once a week, maybe twice, but probably once a week is going to be the sweet spot for you in addition to your strength training, is doing some type of sprint work or anaerobic work where you're doing hill sprints or bleacher sprints, maybe even jump rope intervals, something along those lines. We could save this for a whole nother podcast too, because we just open up the doors when we're talking about conditioning here. But once a week, you do something short, something sweet, 20, 30 minutes, you're done, right? And that's in addition to your walking. Walking should just be like, hey, I want to make sure that I'm getting 10,000 steps in daily. So keep an eye on that. Your iPhone easily can track that. But if you're doing all this stuff, we are now creating a foundation of strength and conditioning and health and fat loss and recovery to reduce the risks that you guys already face. And I'm not even just talking about the health risks. We're talking about getting injured on the fire ground. These small injuries like a muscle pull or a muscle tear, like some of them could be avoided if we were just to train properly, strengthen the connective tissue properly, strengthen the muscle properly, and you might be able to get yourself out of hairy situations if you strengthen the body from head to toe and your conditioning is up to speed so you're not sucking down a bottle of air in 2 minutes, right? Remember, if you could keep your heart rate down and you're not demanding all this excess oxygen as you're doing this physical work, that's going to protect your ass. That's going to protect your partner's ass and your crew's ass, right? And maybe somebody else, some civilian that needs your help, right? So it's your responsibility, it's your obligation to keep yourself in top-notch shape. All right, so I hope this episode helps. I'm a little pressed for time, so I got to cut it shorter than I wanted to today, guys, but we could definitely dive in more. If you have any more questions that's specifically about your training as a firefighter or as a police officer or as a first responder, feel free to hit me up on Instagram at Chris_Tutela, Tutela. I have a sweet spot in my heart for firefighters. Being a firefighter myself gave me an awesome life. It really did. And it introduced me to a lot of great people, and it taught me a lot about myself and about everything, being an EMT and a firefighter and overcoming these fears that I had deep rooted in me that I had to overcome, like the fear of heights and all these things, right? Seeing some unfortunate shit, it does something to you. It helps condition your mind in certain ways and exposes you to certain situations and helps keep you calm in situations where you otherwise get worked up. So it's just such an admirable career, and I really do have so much respect for the men and women who are in the fire service. And if there's anything that I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to. So feel free to hit me up on Instagram. Again, that's at Chris_Tutela. Thank you to all you firefighters, police officers, first responders. You guys don't get enough credit, especially these days. So from the bottom of my heart, just know that I am your number one supporter, your number one fan, and I'm always here to help, guys. So thank you for all that you do, for all that you sacrifice for all of us and keeping us safe. Thank you guys for listening. If you found this episode helpful, please be sure to share it. If you know a firefighter or a first responder who could get a lot out of this episode, please share it with them. And that's all I got for you. I will catch you next week on another episode of the Iron Life Podcast. Peace!